Rewatching The Lion King 2 Simba's Pride in 2023 is a little weird now that The Lion Guard is considered canon. It's impossible to get through the movie without wondering where Simba's son Kion is. However, now that I know the truth, it turned out to be a way sadder reason than I ever imagined. I mean, the most obvious reason for the lack of Kion in The Lion King 2 was simply because his character wasn't created by the time the movie came out, but the reason they gave us in The Lion Guard canon is much more heartbreaking than that. Now, Kion not being present at the very beginning of The Lion King 2 shouldn't be too shocking, considering the fact that he wouldn't have been born yet. Kion is Kiara's younger brother, and since the movie picks up right after the birth of the young lioness, there wouldn't have been enough time for Kion to have been born yet. In fact, Kion wouldn't have been born before the time jump that took place in the second Lion King movie. Before the time jump in the movie, Kiara could be seen roaming around the Pride Lands much like Simba did when he was a cub. Only in Kiara's case, she didn't have a partner to walk around with her, at least not until she met Kovu. But if Kion had been born by that point, he surely would have joined her every time she went out exploring and getting into trouble. This indicates that in the Lion King timeline, Kion wouldn't have been born until well after Kiara met Kovu. In other words, the events of the Lion Guard didn't take place until the time skip in The Lion King 2. On top of that, the Lion Guard ended before Kiara's first hunt, which was the first scene the fans got to see after the time jump. This is how Disney justified Kion not being around. But don't you think that Kion would have been a part of the Pride after the time jump? Unfortunately, that couldn't have been the case, because according to the Lion Guard, it was at that point that Simba's son received the Mark of Evil, a scar that caused the young cub to resemble one of the most sinister lions in Pride Land history. This was all after becoming the leader of the elite Lion Guard, of course. According to the Disney series, the young cub was graced by the Mark of the Elders, which subsequently allows him to call upon a power known as the Roar of the Elders. With this roar, he was charged with protecting the Pride Lands and defending the Circle of Life from anything and everything that might try to cause them any harm. And he got this power just in time, too, because it was right around that moment when all of the sinister animals in the Pride Lands were beginning to band together with a single goal in mind. That goal was to take over the Pride Lands and make way for the resurrection of the villainous Scar. It was discovered that the ghost of Scar was residing in a volcano in the Outlands, where he was commanding an army of outsiders to do his bidding. This potential return of Scar is one of the main reasons why Kion was absent throughout the second Lion King movie. But there's a little more to it than that. You see, after years of fighting off attacks from Scar's army, Simba finally felt as though the Lion Guard and the rest of the Pride were ready to put an end to Scar's madness. They launched an attack on the volcano in the Outlands that was designed to give Kion time to get inside and use the Roar of the Elders to put an end to Scar's ghost. However, things didn't quite go as planned. As Kion and Scar had a heated conversation about destiny, Scar commanded his servant Ushari to strike at the young cub, giving Kion a villainous-looking scar just like the one his great uncle had. At this time, Scar claimed that their matching scars made them the same, and that Kion's fate was now destined to be similar to his evil ancestors. But just because he looked like his villainous great uncle Scar doesn't mean that Kion was going to become inherently evil, right? The strange thing is, Scar seemed to think that was exactly what would happen to the young cub. In fact, he even claimed that Kion was cursed. It wasn't just the scar from Ushari that would supposedly make Kion into a villain, but instead, according to Scar, the Roar of the Elders was more of a curse than a gift, and it would soon lead Kion down a similar path that it had led him. You have to remember, according to the Lion Guard, Scar used to be in the same position that Kion was. That is, until Scar turned the roar on his own pride, proving himself unworthy of its power. It goes deeper than that, though, and Kion's similarities to his great uncle just kept expanding. According to the story, Scar was tricked by another lion in the Pride Lands and put into a position where he too was struck by a wicked snake, resulting in that gnarly scar that he became known for. It was because of the snake's venom that Scar supposedly went mad and turned the Roar of the Elders back on his own kind. And in telling Kion this, Scar was implying that the same thing would happen to the young cub. What was really odd in this situation was the amount of influence that Scar seemed to have on Kion as he explained all of this to him. You could tell that Kion was having a hard time thinking or compiling his thoughts, and Scar took notice of this. Thankfully, Kion was able to shake the peculiar feelings off, and instead of putting an end to Scar himself, the lion explained that Scar would have to answer to the elders of the past. This wasn't the end of Kion's struggles, though, since he still had Ushari's venom within him. When Kion got a chance to look at the scar that the snake gave him, he immediately began to compare himself to his great uncle Scar and started wondering if he was as similar as the villainous ghost had been telling him. him. It was at that moment that his best friend Bunga walked up to Kion and surprised him. Without thinking, Kion let out his powerful roar toward his companion and sent him flying, and even though he was quickly forgiven, Kion couldn't help but feel like Ushari's venom had affected him in a worse way than he had realized, and now he was afraid of hurting those around him. In other words, Kion was forced to ask himself a question: do I stay in the Pride Lands and risk losing control of myself, or do I leave my ancestral home? Luckily, his question was answered for him by the freaky Rafiki. Unluckily, though, the answer was that Kion would be forced to leave the Pride Lands. Going to Rafiki was actually Kion's decision, as he and the rest of the Lion Guard knew that if anyone knew what to do, it would be that crazy Mandrill. In the show, Rafiki was more than happy to help Kion and his friends, especially when he saw that Kion was able to fight off the effects of the venom. He could see that Kion was doing his best to stay calm in an otherwise tense situation. This was when Rafiki told Kion about the Tree of Life and led him down a path that would take him away from the Pride Lands. Rafiki gave Kion a remedy for the venom's effects, but it was only a temporary fix, and eventually the venom would take over once again. That is, unless he sought out the Tree of Life. According to the lore of the Lion Guard, the Tree of Life was this remarkable place outside of the Pride Lands where all sick and injured animals could go if they needed to be healed. According to Rafiki, the only way for Kion to be cured of Ushari's venom and be sure to not turn to the dark side like Scar did in the past was to find the tree and let it work its healing powers. And that's exactly what Kion and his friends knew they had to do. So with the blessing of Simba and the rest of Pride Rock, the Lion Guard left the Pride Lands to go and cure their leader, Kion. But did Kion ever make it back to the Pride Lands? According to The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, he did not return. At least, not by the time the movie was over. This is a little odd, considering at the end of The Lion Guard, Nala set a specific hope for Kion that involved him making it back before the end of the time jump. In one of the last scenes of the show, when Kion was saying goodbye to his family to go and search for the Tree of Life, Nala had some choice words for her son that directly nodded to The Lion King sequel. She said that she hoped he would make it back home in time to witness his sister's first hunt. However, it appears that his search for the Tree of Life, or possibly even his healing process, was going to take an awfully long time. And when you think about it, it's really sad that years have passed since Kion left the Pride and he's still not healed from Ushari's venom. It means that he and the rest of the Lion Guard had been wandering the lands outside of Pride Rock in search of help for Kion. Either that, or it means they found the tree and the healing process either wasn't working or was taking more time than they expected. There's also the worst case scenario where Kion didn't survive his journey to the Tree of Life, or even went full-blown evil. All of these are incredibly grave answers to think about, which is why I personally prefer the idea that he's simply still being healed. He may not have made it back to the Pride in time for Kiara's first hunt, but hopefully he will return soon to an even bigger and happier family. What do you think, though? Do you think Kion will ever return to Pride Rock, or is that a storyline that Disney isn't likely to pursue? Be sure you let me know in the comments below.